Hi class, this is Professor Brennan. We're continuing our discussion about virtual communication. This is for my interpersonal communication class. I'm going to move right to the PowerPoint. We just finished looking at the chart that show the various ways to look at computer-mediated communication and looking at what's in terms of communication from synchronous to asynchronous, and that's what that chart looks at, all the way from like face-to-face to email or texting, and looks at all those pieces as well as richness and leanness. So let's go to the PowerPoint and we'll keep talking about that. Awesome. Okay. So there's a little play on the dark side, obviously. There is, right? We know about that. It's talked about, what we call the dark side of computer-mediated communication. And you've experienced it, right? You've been probably the recipient of it. You might have been the perpetrator of it. And, no one's pointing any fingers or anything like that. But there is this thing that happens with computer-mediated communication that doesn't happen in face-to-face, is this lack of inhibition, right? This lack of inhibition in terms of what we say, the language we use, how we say it. It's almost like I want to call it our alter ego, but it's not really that, is we're able to have like a different personality online, or we care less because we don't have that immediate response from people. We can be less caring about how we communicate with others. And it's almost as if we forget that there are other people on the other end of the computer or the iPad or the phone, right? We forget that. And the thing is, here's kind of the paradox of it, right? The paradox of it is this computer-mediated communication becomes highly personalized, right? We say hyper-personal, meaning that we take things so personally, or we have such reactions to things. Why is that? Is that because we can't get all the information? We're lacking information, so we feel less secure? I would say that that's some of the reason, right? We don't have all the information, so however people behave online seems like a bigger deal than honestly it should be. So here's the thing to remember, like, people are less inhibited. Don't take it personally, right? We want to take it personally because people are less inhibited, right? And this is where when students talk about cyberbullying, right? It's cyberbullying allows people is bullying people online, but there's that disinhibition piece of treating people badly and not feeling like there's any consequence to your action. That's the piece. And so we end up taking these things really personally, but we have to keep it all in context of what we're dealing with. All right, looking at benefits and drawbacks of computer-mediated communication. I'll give you all kinds of different examples here. Benefits. Great opportunities to form relationships. So you have opportunities, you can meet people from all over the world. People you would never meet ever if it wasn't for Facebook, or it wasn't for, if it's a dating app, or it wasn't for Instagram or Twitter, right? Twitter is like, you can meet maybe, and the thing about Twitter, and especially Twitter, is that there's all kinds of people that are celebrities and politicians on that gives you access. You feel like you have access to them that you never had before. Like your voice matters, like what you tweet matters, right? And that's a whole different world than what we lived in before that computer-mediated communication happened. It's a whole new world to feel like the sense of that you might know someone or some closeness. It's different, right? So there's that, and there is also this opportunity to meet more people, to form relationships, more opportunities. It's also a way to sustain and enrich the relationships that you have. So you have relationships, let's say you get to post things and they get to like it and comment on it, and you can post pictures of your friends now instead of like a photo book that you share when people come over. Or, I mean, that's what we used to do in the old days, right? We go take our pictures, they were filmed, we take them to like Kmart or, Rite Aid or something, and they would make them, or it was like Save-Ons or something. That was like a long time ago. And then we would share the pictures, and people would ask for pictures so they could have it, and they'd put it in like in a scrapbook or a picture book. And today, we do the same thing, but we have social media accounts in which we share that information. And when we share that information with pictures, it makes people feel close. It makes people feel like they matter. Just one way that we're able to sustain and enrich our relationships. And then we also can find, social support, right? Social support in different various groups on social media. We can find it through all kinds of groups, probably a lot more groups than I'm even aware of. But groups that are for mental health, groups for 12-step programs, groups for women, groups for men, groups for vegans, groups for people who are animal rights activists, probably groups for people that are Second Amendment activists. I'm sure there's groups for everything. So there's ways that you can get social support for your beliefs and your ideas, and through that with a greater array of different people, then you wouldn't have that if you were just without the internet in your community. You'd have your community, but this extends it out. All right. So we're going to look at text messaging just for a second. Text messaging and relational maintenance. It just is an interesting little piece of information. So what I've noticed is the younger generation, and I'm talking like you all in my class, and under 30, under 25, use texting rather than talking to each other on the phone as a way, and maybe you don't now as much, but when you were in your teens you did, you use that to maintain your relationships with people. Okay, and actually it's funny because I'm a lot older than you, and I do that now too. I will text people rather than call them. It seems like it takes less time, and that I want to keep the relationship going, but I don't want to take the time to have the phone conversation sometimes, but I just want to say hello. So texting has become this way to maintain our relationships. And what this chart looks at is to what degree it looks like, for me, friendship maintenance. That's the highest degree, where most people use texting to maintain their friendships. And secondary is romantic. Third is sexual relationships. Fourth is this informational part, practical arrangement. Salutary, let's say hello, how are you doing, good morning, to make social arrangements. And I wonder why. Let's look at that. Why do you think that social arrangements on texting is not necessarily the best way to make social arrangements? Just think about it for a minute, right? Sometimes if you have something like really complicated and you need to meet somewhere and it's complicated, you need to have that conversation. They need to either write it down or you send them the link or something, right? But sometimes making social arrangements and you have to go back and forth in terms of getting a date, sometimes it's just easier to pick up the phone and say, what day are you available, right? So informational, relational, chain message, that's the least. Those are the most annoying things, right? Okay, moving on. Looking at the drawbacks. So the thing about the drawbacks, obviously, is that your relationships can become really superficial, right? They don't, ones that were superficial are likely to remain superficial, meaning on the surface, right? You don't know each other that well. And sometimes they can just either become that way or remain that way. You can get a sense of social isolation from just letting social media be the only way that you have your relationships, right? Because if you remember what we talked about early on in the semester, we talked about our need for physical contact. which is one of the reasons why COVID is so hard for so many single people and for people that live alone. Maybe they're not, or they're maybe they only live with one person, or not, or people that are really extroverted and need lots of people around them and don't have that availability to do that. So it can feel very social isolating. And it can lead to your relationships deteriorating if that's the only way. I mean, it can be for a couple different reasons, right? It can be because of things that are posted on social media, or how people act or what they say, right? And you don't check it out. Remember we talked about that lack of inhibition and hyper-personalizing everything. Hyper means over personalizing things, okay, rather than to the extreme. That's what hyper means. So that part of what can happen is your relationships can deteriorate as a result of not confronting those issues. And obviously the issue of deception, it's always there because you can't really check it out. And so especially deception, probably more so with people you don't know and people just trying to say who they are and where they aren't, like catfishing, or I have people trying to friend me from other countries that I don't know anybody in that country. And I'm like, no. And they could be male or female. And then what I always do is, this happens to me on my Facebook account, is I always go and check it out, right? I'm like, who are these people? And I go check it out and go, no. Sometimes in the past, I would become friends with someone if they were friends with someone else. But I don't even really do that anymore. Because deception around in social media, the chance of it and your account getting hacked is just a hassle. So these are the drawbacks, right? The things, there's always drawbacks in every situation. Every situation that seems so good, there's always something that's not good about it. So these are some of the potential drawbacks from social media or computer-mediated communication. Okay, finally, and I just kind of reference that, is stalking and harassment, right? It's people can stalk you, they can bother you, they can harass you, but you do have the ability to, one, delete them, you can block them. Now there's becoming lots of ways in privacy management in social media in order to deal with this stuff. So utilize those. Don't let yourself be harassed if you can stop it, right? And report it. Report things like that happening. Okay, we are going to see what's on next, and I think we're going to stop at the next slide. Yes, we're going to stop here because next we're going to talk about women and men and the differences in how they use social media. We'll be right back.